Welcome back, audience. Hope you're doing good. As always, cheers. A little mate. And in the last few days, there was a quite significant alchemical challenge. Not the biggest one ever, but I'm sure that if you have been paying attention, and I hope you did, um, that there was a lot to alchemize in the last few days. And there still is. And that's what I want to talk about. This particular time fractal that's just been passing by, um, the structure of these time fractals, the alchemy of them, and I want to talk a little bit about the tarot as well, how tarot relates to this model of consciousness that I'm talking about, and um, how it is used correctly and how it is misused and turned into some sort of obsessive, addictive cycles that are just perpetuating, but they're not really creating your manifestation. Just an illusion. It's a trap. So anyway, talking about this specific alchemical process has been happening lately. It is what I call water challenge, because it was about the feeling of pressure or numbness and poisonous sensation as well. And upon placing attention there and not giving up, because I mean you gotta latch onto this, focus it, find it, and stay with it as long as it's necessary. You understand? That's your priority. Even if you have to do other stuff, while you're doing other stuff, you remain focused there. You don't let it go. And after some time, it may start giving up and releasing it. And as it's doing that, there's this bittersweet feeling that you may feel in your chest going up your throat. This is why some people call nectar of the Amrita. That's when you are alchemizing that poison into fruit, so to speak, right? Um, that process. Okay, this is huge, by the way. That's what she said, but besides the point. Sorry, one second. Can't take anything serious anymore. Anyway, right. And that is this process where you are permanently changing that distortion into coherence. That numbness, that poisonous feeling starts with. Um, Now, first of all, if you get to that point, that's already congratulations. And then you just have to latch onto this with your attention and awareness and don't let go until it starts giving in and starts releasing the coherence out of it. That is a true transmutation of that distortion. And that is um, how you essentially live your life. That's how you deal with your negative emotions. You deal it with logos and eros. You combine logos and eros back together. Because whatever you are dissolving is that distortion. It's that reason for anything divisive and anything negative in your life. So now I want to talk a little bit more about this structure. I call it water challenge because it's distinct from, for example, fire challenge. Fire challenge is a type of pain. It's a feeling that you eventually find it where all the aggression is coming from and where all the fear is coming from. Now, the pain itself would be this element of fire, this primordial distortion in your soul. And it may be polarized towards masculine, which is then it becomes aggression or anger. That's a masculine skew of that feeling. So it goes into emotions of anger. Or the feminine one, which goes in emotions of fear. And then anxiety, which is what I'm trying to say. Whatever is going on, you can always trace it back to pain. Whether you experience anxiety or fear, you can follow it and you're going to trace it back to pain. If you're experiencing anger as well, pay attention on that anger and you're going to trace it back to that pain. And now that's not what's been happening the last few days, but I'm just saying in comparison of what the fire challenges looks like and what the water challenge looks like. Okay, it's different. And of course there's earth and then there's air challenge. And earth is to do with pressure and heaviness, right? Earth, it's like the laziness sometimes when you like feel very heavy, right? That's to do with earth challenge. You can also alchemize that as well. All of these four elemental challenges can be alchemized, should be alchemized. That's how you play the game. This is where you start now. And the air is confusion. Again, the confusion may be skewed towards masculine and the feminine. A masculine would be sort of like schizophrenic delusion or hallucination of completely disorganized things that have no, cohesive or coherent form. That's delirium, sometimes called, right? And the feminine side of confusion is like a feminine side of confusion is like it's a passive confusion. I'm just trying to find something that you can relate to. Like the actual real life experience, the state of consciousness that people experience. And I don't know, perhaps hysteria might be one of those. Oh, okay. Anyway, these videos that I'm making are very free form and I'm just speaking, but I'm also working on something that is very, very precise, very scientific, and very orderly, if you will. But you get the point. What I'm trying to tell you here is that there are these four elements. These are four types of distortions of this holographic toroidal field that is your consciousness. Electromagnetic field that is your consciousness. And depending on what kind of state it is, these are the feelings that you're experiencing. Okay. I also want to say that those four elements can be skewed towards masculine and feminine. Okay, so that's times 2. Then also there are 7 colors. Of course, you well know there are 7 colors, and therefore there are 7 layers of the feelings, right? So all this fundamental white light, bliss, and this black void peace energy, this fundamental, splits into these 7 layers, Okay, and each of those 7 layers could be distorted or coherent. So that's why you have to have 7 of them. Okay, like on all of these on all of these 7 layers, you may have one of those 4 elemental challenges that can be skewed towards masculine and feminine. You see, that results in 56 negative emotions. That means there are 56 demons, if you will. Okay, you can call it 7 of these layers of the feelings. Sometimes you call energy centers. It's different when you are feeling the feeling, in your chest, or when you're feeling in your um, uh, the gut. It has different quality. It has a feeling, for example, of the security, right, and the feeling of love, different, right? They all stem from this blissful white light, but it has that color. And whenever, for example, that is blocked, then you may have a feeling of the grief, right? I don't want to go into the details right now. I just want to talk about the structure, and that's kind of enough, actually. Like if you alchemize anything that comes your way, only through your own experience you can start noting, okay, this is this type of alchemy, this type of alchemy, these types of feelings, this type of emotion. And you can start noting, and you'll find exactly what I found, that there are 4 types of these challenges skewed to the masculine and feminine at the 7 layers in your soul. We're talking about the world of feelings and emotions right now, soul, the germ level. Okay, and we're going to go into the mind and the body in a second, but this is where we're at right now. We're at the alchemy and theurgy part of it. Now, so there are 56 of these demons, and um, in tarot, there are 56 minor arcana cards, right? Also split into the 4 types. Okay, now that denotes those 56 distortions that you may experience. Okay, they all boil down to 7. You can call it 7 archons, um, 4 elementals, and then you can go into ultimate, and you can say the devil would be that is, it's actually like divisive process of consciousness that is useful in logics and physical material world to solve problems and navigate this reality. But what it's doing in a soul level, it's creating these negative feelings. And the game is to place your attention at the source of that divisive factor, sometimes called critical factor. Okay, um, and it's always kind of gonna be there. But the point of the game is to keep on alchemizing until your logos settles with eros, and there's nothing divisive between logos and eros. That factor that was divisive, the factor of the time, is alchemized, and there's this time side of it and the infinite side of it. This is, you have a capacity of being something infinite within temporal. I always say this is why it's necessary. This is why there's this principle called devil in your heart. It is a challenge. So you, as an individual soul, can be capable of being infinite within temporal. That's the game. This is like, that is what the great work is. That is what the magnum opus is. And don't listen to anybody that calls something else a great work. They may not even be in touch with these processes. Okay, um, we're talking about something that is for real. Okay, each of these 56 demons, if you will, have intensity levels as well, because time is in a spiral. It can the closer it gets to the center, the more intense it gets. Okay? This is why you want to sort of like eat the entire snake, not letting go of your attention from it. No matter how challenging it is, prioritizing that over anything else in your life. Because that's the basis of, that's the foundation of your life. Whether you have this primordial background of peace and bliss within your heart, that's this infinite that you're bringing into the temporal. And it's, I always say that it needs courage and surrender, and a specific type of focus that's sort of like in betweenness, like in the Icarus story. Don't fly too close to the sun because you'll burn your wax wings. Don't fly too close to the water because you're going to be swept under and drown, right? That's the game with all of these challenges. That's the real meditation, by the way. The real meditation is not, oh, there's a little animal that's just like eating my grass and chilling. All right, cool. Looks like capybara, but small one. Don't know what they're called. But just completely comfortable and chilling here. All right. Now, okay. So, alchemy and the structure of alchemical processes, right? By the way, what I'm talking about was discovered by me through the real experience. This is why, like I said before, everything that I read, everything that I said from the outside, I scratched it and I went directly by myself, and you should too. Because now everything that I'm discovering, it's not some sort of memory knowledge. It is part of me. This is what something people call wisdom, because it's part of you always. You don't need to check your memory bank to recall this. You are living it in the real-time moment. Okay? If anything comes from that, it comes from the spontaneous. It comes as an insight. And the memory is only used for the skills and the frame control. Okay? The more I learn about this by exploring myself, the more fascinating it gets. Now, so we have these 56 demons, right? The reality is that, okay, let's just finish with the tarot. So there's 56 minor arcana, and there's 22 major arcana, right? There's actually 21, and there's 10. Why? What does that mean? The major arcana is talking about the structure of consciousness, and minor arcana is talking about the function of consciousness, and it's relating to those distortions. Why there's 22? There's 22 because, first of all, there's 21 out of 3 sevens. There are 7 layers in your soul, 7 energy centers, if you will, right? There are 7 colors. You can observe it in physical world, that has these 7 types of feelings, right? When you start observing your feelings, you start realizing that, oh, I know this one's red feeling, this one's orange, this one's yellow, this one's green, this one's blue, this one's indigo, and this one's very royal feeling. This one's is purple, if you will, right? And then you can go directly to the center of all this, and then you can experience or feel the white feeling, which is, again, it's just, it's light itself. That's when you're like, it's hard to describe. But anyway, what I'm trying to tell you is that there are definitely the colors of the feelings. Okay, through your own experience, you can have that. Now I'm talking about the already coherent levels of the feeling. Anyway, now going to the mind, there are also 7 dimensions of the mind. Going to the body, there are also 7 sensations. Now the 7th is all encompassing. Sorry. Now, for example, the color purple, it has the tendency of having the entire rainbow there. It's not yet white, but it's sort of all connecting as well. This is why it's called royal, because that color, it's sort of encompassing all. Does that make sense? For example, in a 7th dimension in the mind, that's more like a DMT dimension, where it's sort of like you the truth itself, which is just like ever-changing fractals that is infinite in time, and it keeps on changing, right? There's this Mandelbrot fractal zoom that happens sometimes when you take DMT and you connect to that state. And that is all-encompassing. Everything's going to be made out of those fractals, everything. But you're looking at the reality itself at the before it's been filtered by the mind and made into some form, some meaning, or anything like that. It's just pure Mandelbrot fractal zoom in a feeling of rainbow bliss. That's the 7th dimension of consciousness, that all encompassing. Okay, and then you go in the 6th, and it has this geometrical structures that now you can make some meaning of it. There's also you and your environment in the 7th dimension. I don't experience in the 7th dimension that there's you and your environment. You are environment and you are that at the same time. And then, the 5th, the 4th, these are the world of form, the astral, and the 3rd world of form in the physical, and 2nd and 1st. Anyway, but these are all dimensions of thought. In each of this dimension, there's a thought. It could be an image, it could be a pattern, it could be whatever, but this exact same process. It's the mind is a patterning mechanism and a tool, and there's a 7 layers of these thoughts. Again, it follows the same structure of 56. You're going to find 56 distortions in the mind as well, problems to resolve, or the thoughts that you may have stemming from these 56 negative emotions. Body as well, you will also find 56 points of disorder, if you will. This is all sort of related. But talking about this 22, the 22nd is a 0 and a 777. The 7 in your soul, the 7 in the dimensions in the body, and 7 levels of sensation, in the mind, and 7 levels of sensations in the body. That is where those 21 major arcana come from. It's talking about and referring to one of those structures of consciousness. And the 22nd is a 0. And 0 is the whole. It's also talking about that absolute. Okay? It includes the 0. That's why it's 22. And 22 plus 56, you get 78. So this is the original meaning of the tarot. Okay? Now, as you notice, you don't need tarot cards to wake up every morning and sense what is there to feel on emotional level, or as you go through the day. These things happen because of just simply of time space. Okay? And these challenges happen based on exactly what time and space you are in. Not because somebody pulled the card. You see? It also, these thoughts that arise from these, one of those 56 distortions, demons, if you will, are all predictable and they're all the same. And if the person is feeling that particular distortion, is going to produce these particular thoughts. It's all very predictable, And some people may not realize that, of how predictable that is, and they think, well, I'm only the one that's feeling those feelings and having these thoughts. No, any thought from the negative feeling is absolutely predictable, is absolutely repeatable, and everybody else who in that particular state of consciousness share that thing. You see? This is why sometimes people say, well, these are not your thoughts, because it's sort of like these are mechanical thoughts that pulled out from the hive mind, given the fact that you're in that state. That's why these thoughts start appearing, because now you're kind of exploring that contrast, that distortion, and you're seeing what kind of thoughts it's there and what kind of reality is generating, right? And that's why the smart thing to do is trace it back to the source of it and dissolve that distortion, that reason why it created these negative thoughts. Okay? Now, during the tarot reading, sometimes, they pull one card and people, because lots of people share these thoughts, they say, oh my God, this is exactly what happened to me. It's like, oh yeah. Because they are, like patterns. Say like, oh, here's this pattern. This is what's happening to you. And then a lot of people relate to these patterns because, of course, man, they're in the same boat. So then there's an agreement there. Okay? Now the problem with that, and the dark side of tarot, is that they can continue pulling these cards randomly and basically telling you, at this point, is there's a suggestion, because look, how hypnosis works is like this. First of all, in order for you to make a person hallucinate reality or feel what is suggested to feel, and you first need to have that consciousness agreement that lets go the critical factor of doubt. And so therefore, if I say to you like, oh, this is what you feel right now, and you actually feel it, then there's an agreement. And if I continue doing something and I keep on telling you something that is true, eventually that critical factor is going to let go and be open to suggestion. And then I can say something that is not actually happening, but then because there's this openness, you will feel that as if it's happening. You will be hallucinating that, dreaming that in the reality. And so, as you can see, it can be used for awesome stuff, creating what you want, or it can be used for evil stuff. Okay? So hypnosis in this sense is not intrinsically evil, but it can be used for evil. And if you have a gullible person who's kind of looking to pacify that negative feeling within themselves through some idea, image of pleasure or pain, that's the trap. Because they continue pulling the cards and they say, well, that's what's going on. And that may not be going on with you, right? Because it's like, well, do I know for a fact it's going on? And so then they suggest all sorts of like third parties. They just suggest all sorts of like run as chasers. They go into these patterns that they already exist in a dysfunctional hive mind, and they are suggesting that to you and recording that. And that is then, because you're suggestible at that point, you are creating that and accepting that as normal. This is not normal. This is nothing to do with love. There's nothing to do with the harmonious relationship. All of that is dark stuff that perpetuates this pain and pleasure cycle. Okay? So if they see like hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and most of these people are just addicts. They may have stopped watching porn, but now they're watching tarot. It's exact same trap of the Matrix. And this idea that like, oh, you're doing something good because people are suffering, so then I'm going to give a pacifier and pacify their pain with pleasure, and that is good. No, that is evil. I've said this in the previous video. The definition of the evil is anything that forces the coherence in your incoherent consciousness through external means. That is this false light thing, and that is evil. When there was just suffering before, that's not evil, because you can place your attention and awareness and dissolve the suffering, and not only dissolve the suffering, you turn this into bliss and peace. That's what it's for. That's what it's for. But if you don't do this process, you will have no choice but to go into something that is evil. And I know that people may sometimes use the word evil for something that is extreme. But whether it's a minor or extreme, it's still evil. Okay? It's a participation of the evil. And you say, well, road to hell is paved with good intentions, you see? So that is not how you live life. You don't need to watch anybody reading these stars. And if you are addicted to this, you watch yourself when you're watching this video. What is it about you that is looking for some sort of solution outside of you, and alchemizing that? And there is, of course, a entertainment value of this, but it gets to the point where the entertainment is all about, a pretty woman talking in a beautiful musical background, right? Like, that's just like nice to look at, but you're not looking at it because she says something to you and she suggests something to you, and lullaby you into this dysfunctional karmic reality. And it's always dysfunctional and taken and accepted as normal. It is absolutely not normal. This has nothing to do with harmonious relationship. It's just still matrix nonsense. Okay? But there is that structure of consciousness, and you can definitely, through the use of tarot, refer to what kind of situation you're dealing with. Okay? And that's what it must be used for. It's not used for this pacification of your pain. And if, like I said, if you watching that, anything that you do, like whatever, if you start watching your feelings rather than listening to what they're saying on a mind level, you start dissolving all of that. And then what may happen is what they're saying is no longer triggering, moving, or doing anything to you. It's just like a background noise. And then you won't be gravitating to watch that video, similar videos again. You can set yourself free by alchemizing that feeling, that reason of why you're watching, to pacify that feeling, right? You can watch yourself like that. This is why I say, like, it's not about isolating yourself. It's about living your life normally, seeing things if they come up. If they trigger, you alchemize it, find a way how to not to respond to this anymore, respond with peace. Or if something's positive, respond with bliss. I always say, like, if you want less of that in your life, you need to feel the peace about that. Because if you feel the fire, anger, something, okay, you're gonna have more of that. You gotta zero it out. And if you want something more in your life, then you need to feel bliss about that. This is how the universe language works. Okay? So when somebody's, or any situation in your life that happens, or somebody says something and it triggers you, and there's this fear of loss of your partner or whatever, that's just showing you that it's still there, that's generating that reality. You alchemize that changes. Okay, I don't want to harp on this too much, but I hope you get this point, because there is absolutely a way to enter the reality based on the feelings that you're feeling. That's the aura that you're going to have, and that's the effect you're going to have on the reality. When you have no fear anymore of losing, your partner or anything like that, that's when that disappears. You see, it's and that's how it really works. Neville Goddard was trying to communicate that through saying, feeling is the secret, and he did his best to describe this alchemical process. But that's where you start, okay? Only then, after you alchemize one of those 56 distortions, then it settles into this infinite field, coherent field, peace, bliss. And out of that, now you go into the world of theurgy. Theurgy is what do you do with that peace, bliss energy, and what kind of music or feelings you're creating from that. That is, you are basically making your new reality. You are creating a dream that already you're imbuing those feelings in that dream. That's the germ level, and that is theurgy. That is working within the infinite and the primordial temporal reality. And the primordial temporal reality is these positive feelings that are moving in poetic, musical way that is kind of becomes, your 7 strings of the instrument, but there's so many variations that you can play. This is why it's unique. You can create a unique melody, which what you would feel given the fact of experiencing this particular event in your life. And that is your true desire. And whenever that comes to you in the real, in physical, is going to be imbued with exact same feelings or similar feelings that is going to be more spontaneous. At that particular time is going to be more spontaneous. But when you did your theurgy, you were imbuing that dream reality. That's the future. You were basically selecting out of all the potential futures. You were selecting one and collapsing the waveform function on that particular reality. Okay, and creating that as a past, and then in a chronological sense you're experiencing that. And when you're experiencing when you're experiencing in a chronological sense everything, it is just happens. There's not like a lot of state control is needed. It's just happening because you already done that state control, and with those awesome feelings and emotions you imbued some form that you may want to experience. Okay, and then it comes in real life, but it's not exactly the same. It has surprise elements, and that's the point of what your mind wants anticipation. I'm going to talk about this in a second, but what I'm trying to say here is that you're not micromanaging things, and because you're not micromanaging, you're giving the quality of the feelings you want to experience in some rudimentary form that is not specific, and then you let the universe to show what that looks like in a specific sense. So you're not a puppet master. Like I said before in a previous video, you don't make specific person behave in a specific way. You're creating this role that somebody gonna step in to play that role, but you're not forcing anybody to step in that role. That's it. Like, you're not using any force. You're just letting it happen. And then if you are letting it happen, then everything's gonna be spontaneous, beautiful, just like you created. Okay, but there's gonna be a surprise element because if you were to just write a complete script of how it's going to happen and then it happens exactly the same, you would lose that anticipation bonus that your mind wants. Okay, mind and body functions on this anticipation function, I suppose. Okay, And so that's theurgy, and it is about mixing and matching these feelings. It is a type of primordial imagination, but it's like that seventh and sixth um, density where these feelings are just like a fractal forms that you're experiencing, right? And have the quality of the feelings. I hope I'm making sense here, okay? Theurgy. And then you go into thaumaturgy. Thaumaturgy is becoming more about the form. And if you want to create something specific, if you want to have I don't know, whatever you want to have in a specific color, then you specify things, and that's thaumaturgy. You can go into this specifics about things, not beings, not people. Okay? Because things can be managed away. They don't have free will. But anybody that has the right to the free will should not be used in a sort of specific manner. Okay? Once they sign up for it, so to speak, once they step into that role, then of course the person is already stepped into that role. Then within that role, you can put a face on the feelings, right? Okay, hopefully making sense. Now, the anticipation part that I was talking about. Mind and body is different, and it does work on magics and logics, and this is the thing that was a problem, so to speak. It's not really a problem, but a challenge within your heart. Now it's becoming a tool in the physical reality, because now you need to have logics, logistics, use that tool, and discrimination and that doubt externally, not internally. Doubt is useless internally, because it just says like, oh no, it won't happen. But if there is a desire, of it happening, and there's a doubt, and just blocking that desire. But when you go into this space of non-dual space, where there can't be any opposing thing, then that just is, right? And because it just is, that's what you're projecting on your astral screen, and that's what you're recording in the reality to come to you, you see. So now the mind part. The reason I'm talking about this is because it doesn't work the same way your soul does. The mind needs anticipation. This is why, for example, if you don't have anything to anticipate for, it's different from having a fear and then, taking action out of that. I'm talking about this after the alchemy and theurgy is done and you feel amazing. You still want to have something in the mind for the mind to anticipate. Anticipate some form of resolution, some accomplishment, something anticipating. This is normal and healthy, and it should be there. Because if you don't have that, mind is not functioning right. Okay, so everything that was kind of wrong in your soul now needs to be used as a tool. And so that's why the devil, if you will, is a very awesome servant. Okay, and I mean, look, I'm talking about something that you already know, right? It feels good to anticipate something that is about to happen, but hasn't yet happened. Okay? Now, some may say, okay, this is already kind of time reality. Yes, but you can be remaining in a peace, bliss, infinite, and acting on a time reality as well. Like, that's how it should be. Because when somebody says, like, well, that's just it, there's no future, there's no past, it's just an illusion, it's just somebody trying to put your attention on that essence, right? But it's not that your mind is no longer functioning and no longer looking forward to something that you're about to eat, some exercise you're going to do, or something. Your mind needs that. Your mind needs anticipation, because that's what it builds up the dopamine reserves, because there's an anticipation, and then there's the release of the dopamine satisfaction. Your mind functions. It's healthy. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay? And same thing with the body as well. This is different from pacifying the negative feeling in your heart. This is just resolving some goal, some task that you have. Mind functions like that. Mind functions with the future, past, and the present. It has to function like that. Okay? You don't want to. This is why you don't destroy the devil. You repurpose the devil to be appropriated where it's supposed to be. The devil is that divisive factor that splits things. Okay? And every time you anticipate something that is about to happen, there's that split happening. But then the mind is good. And the mind has that anticipation now because it's split. It's a mind sort of desire. And then boom, later there's completion of that task, release of the dopamine, and there's a satisfaction about that. Same thing with the body. You see? It's good. It's good to have this anticipation in the mind and the body level. I'm just trying to be very clear of how, the proper place of pleasure and the proper place of joy. If you're going to do something and you haven't done your alchemy and you're going to do this because you have a fear and whatnot, and that thing is going to not just resolve that disconnect in your mind as an accomplishment of the goal, but it also needs to pacify your negative feelings. That's when you're going into the red, and that's when you're going into the matrix. You see? This exactly what I've been looking for, and I found how to reconciliate that thing. I found that the mind works like that, and you cannot make the mind work like your soul. Your soul wants to be connected to the infinite, and the mind just needs an energy from your soul, and it will always separate, split up, poof. There's a desire of accomplishing a task, whatever it may be. It's like you create an image. Okay, that's me having my food. Boom, there's a desire there. And then you are eating the food, there's a completion there. And there's this pleasure. And it's fine within the mind. It's fine. That's how it's supposed to function. Am I making sense? It's already functioning like that. So this is mind level. It works in a temporal way, and it doesn't give you the contentment and the joy of life. It just gives you a temporal release of pleasure and the dopamine upon completing the task. But then there's another one that comes online, and then you do that one, and that one has a release, and then there's another one that comes online. And so these are mind level desires that could be part of creativity that you do. Oh, I want to create that. Okay, that's a desire. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. Fulfill, have that pleasure release. So it's nice and it's healthy to function that way. This is why I think that this whole spiritual teachings, rather than putting everything into its right place, takes the people out. And out of that, what's normal about the mind, what's normal about desire, and pathologizes that. And then you have these people that are super very passive, and they're not, they're trying to avoid a desire. It's like, oh, I shouldn't want this thing because that's a desire. It's like, what the fuck? So what, you going to be like a plant? Or are you going to create something and play and enjoy life? And put the pleasure where it belongs. Right? Because the desire of the mind of making some image to be like that, right? Desire is basically an image. It's like you want something, there's an image there. Oh, I want that. Okay, cool. Now, when that's gonna happen, you're gonna release some, satisfaction, dopamine, and you're gonna experience pleasure. That's all good. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay? The problem happens is when you have a negative feeling within your heart and you want that thing that accomplishment to pacify that feeling, to compensate for that. That's the problem. Because accomplishing something does not do anything to your soul. It may do something on the mind level and give you satisfaction and pleasure on the mind level, but it doesn't do anything to your soul. I mean, it is, if you use that for the soul, then it pacifies this negative feeling and it creates you know what it creates? It creates this false light, soul pleasure, which is not good. Like I said, it's evil. That's the addiction part. This is why you can have things, but they're just mind desires. You just play with your mind. It's not, if they're gone, it doesn't do anything. There's nothing painful in your soul because you're still full of joy. But you cannot be so passive in this world and not have any of mind level desires. Because how would you, in the process of creation, right? If you want to create something, that has to be a desire. So everything is put in the right place. And if you do your alchemy, if you have that base of enjoyment and nice feelings, then anticipate something, look forward to something, use your mind to create that image. Imagine that. Build up that anticipation for that. And then fulfill it and experience that satisfaction and pleasure. Okay? That's just the correct use of consciousness. And that's honestly the health of the mind. You need to have a healthy soul, healthy mind, and healthy body. And how it all functions in the soul is different how it functions in the mind. And so everything needs to be appropriated correctly. Okay? I'm telling you this because, I've been through and I'm finding the real answers and how consciousness really works through my experience. And because unless you do it yourself, anything that you hear from other people can create a belief system, and then you're artificially trying to fight something that must be natural. This idea of like, oh, not having desire. Like somebody said that and says like, well, you suffer because of your desire, because you desire. Okay, is that it? Is that what you're gonna tell to people? Then he's like, well, how do you not to desire things? And then, of course, it's impossible. Rather than explaining people very simply, there is a soul desire that can only be fulfilled through your attention and awareness through the process of alchemy. Your soul wants feelings. Okay? Then that is done. Okay? This is how you fulfill your desires in your soul. Mind desires are for the specific images of form. Mind wants some specific form. The car that you want to have, the house that you want, it's a form thing. It's an image of something. And so that's what your mind wants. In order to, the way you pacify, or excuse me, I shouldn't say pacify, the way you fulfill that desire is through imagining that thing that you want. Okay? Already feeling all the good feelings of your soul in your soul that you've already alchemized, through the process of theurgy. And so that is now for you is being enjoyed, right? You by using your imagination, you are using the future to collapse the waveform function into past, which is time. And if it's in the past already, then only when it's already in the past is going to come into your chronological experience, right? Okay, so that's how you fulfill, and you should have those desires fulfilled. Okay, and then the body desires as well. They're kind of related, because a lot of times what you want about the body isn't, can also be built by the mind. But the body desires are just biological desires, right? Biological needs like water, food, exercise. Those are body desires that are there. So obviously this life is about fulfilling your desires correctly on all the levels, in your soul, in your mind, and in the body. Obviously. None of this bullshit. I don't know. I'm sure that these original teachings had good intentions, but they just made a complete mess. And if you see what I'm saying, life becomes supernatural and normal, and there's nothing wrong with anything. Jesus, like, you see what I'm trying to say? There's no more disorder in the process of living. You are simply playing this video game that was meant to be played because it was meant to be played for your enjoyment, for your entertainment. Okay? What else can I say about this? Anyway, I think that's it. Hopefully, I communicated what's up. And as you can see, like 90% of the things just obviously it's a noise, and it's all right. Like, that noise must exist like in the background, but that's not your primary life. Like, you don't get caught in those things. You do not, and it's impossible to get caught in those things if you live life like that. Okay? And you're not trying to destroy the devil, so to speak. You are employing it where it belongs. Okay? I've been thinking about this very, very carefully. And watching those phenomena of consciousness. For example, if you look at the toroidal field of electromagnetic field, if you have this complete coherence, then you have this unified field of consciousness, and that would be like that bliss peace state, out of which then every time it just cues towards like one color, one form, like geometrical fractal, it produces the feeling that is like an emotion, right? Positive. It's still coherent. So that's the unified field. Now, the double torus, and by the way, unified field is shown because like torus goes like that, and keeps going. That's the infinity sign, and then 8, that's a sign of the time, the the hourglass, right? It's a shape of 8. That's why, by the way, the true meaning of those 4 petal leaves. Anyway, besides the point. So now, when you're in a temporal state, you have a dual torus. Okay? That's time reality now. And the way it's reciprocating is different. Right? But it wants that reciprocation. At the top, what's inside. Okay, what's within, so without. What's above, so below. What does that mean? What's within, that's your infinite coherent state of consciousness. So without, that's the feelings and emotions that you're experiencing in life. What's above, what kind of form are you imagining? That's the future. So below, what experience you're experiencing, that's your past. Okay? And the future immediately, as soon as you create the future, it becomes the past, right? And that's the temporal reality. That's how it works. And the temporal reality is run by motivation and pleasure, and the infinite reality